Do you think AI is really replacing lawyers? I think we have different views.
I do not think AI is going to replace lawyers. I think there's actually going to be more lawyers, which is even more controversial.
But I am actually worried about lawyers. I think a lot of them don't realize the impact that's coming.
If you fall behind now, there's almost like no coming back with how fast things change. Ultimately, you can't kind of compete with that on a human basis. You can't meet those numbers. Humans can't work that fast.
Is it a recipe for disaster?
Is it a recipe for disaster now? The answer is yes. The lazy attorney. Every couple days, there's some news out about some attorney who cited a bunch of fake cases. If I was an attorney, or if I was going through law school now, I would probably quit and just go into plumbing or something else, candidly speaking. I think it's a very scary place to be.
Today I'm sitting down with Rafi. He is someone with a fascinating perspective on where the legal profession is heading. Rafi is a former M&A lawyer who worked at Kirkland Ellis, Gunderson and Goodwin, before going through Y Combinator and founding Mage Legal. If you don't already know, Mage helps law firms and in-house legal teams automate legal due diligence. It scans entire data rooms, flags risky clauses, generates diligence reports, compares readiness, and produces follow-up questionnaires, allowing lawyers to focus their time where it adds value the most. Alongside building Mage, I also love the fact that Rafi runs Coding for Lawyers, which helps legal professionals develop technical skills to build with AI better. In this conversation, we really get into why Rafi believes AI won't replace lawyers but will completely reshape the profession. And we discuss why he thinks today's market leaders may not be tomorrow's winners, why law firms are becoming technology companies, and what lawyers need to do now if they want to stay relevant in an AI-first world. Our goal for this conversation was actually to have more of a debate and a discussion around key areas and arguments about how AI is impacting the legal profession. Do you think AI is really replacing lawyers? Because I think we have different views.
I do not think AI is going to replace lawyers. So, it's a strong stance there. I think some things will be replaced, right? And I do not think we're looking at a world where lawyers are still not employed, right? And there still aren't huge law firms. I think there's actually going to be more lawyers, which is even more controversial.
I think that the role of the lawyer generally will not be replaced. It can't really be replaced. We need lawyers. We need human lawyers. But I think the majority will probably be cut and reused in different areas of a law firm or retrained to do different things, not the traditional legal roles that we see today.
I don't disagree with you. There was a point in time where people would redline with a ruler and a pencil. Data rooms used to be actual rooms that you would go to and sit in, right? And it's so funny because every time I mention this to a partner where I'm like, oh, aren't you worried you're buying our product or whatever it is, and aren't you worried it's going to reduce hours, or aren't you worried that all these other AI products you're buying are going to reduce? Yeah, and it always invites a story. In my day, right, we used to sit there we used to carry boxes and data room on litigation. Discovery was us looking at individual pieces of paper, and there was no control F. So I don't think it's actually going to be a big problem as far as. I'm not worried about the lawyers.
I am actually worried about lawyers.
Yeah. Tell me why. Would love to see why.
I think a few reasons. I think a lot of them don't realize the impact that's coming. A lot of them are kind of in their own bubbles. I used to be in a bubble when I worked in law. You kind of know your firm, you know the way you work, and you don't really see the bigger picture. I didn't really used to interact with people from other law firms apart from people who were my friends from law school or other jobs and stuff. And I was in this bubble. And I think now stepping out of law, I see the bigger picture, and I see, actually, I'm concerned because I know what it's like to be in a law firm and just grinding away and just doing your thing. And I think that a lot of them don't realize the impact that it's going to have, but also how they really need to understand AI and be able to, reskill and upskill themselves. That's my biggest concern for them.
That I agree. I think if you fall behind now, there's almost no coming back with how fast things change. And I think on the flip side of that, I think firms and kind of lawyers who take advantage of the tools and kind of restructure and are a little bit flexible, I think ultimately win, right? I don't know that the winners now, the big firms now, the ones who are ahead now are going to be the same ones in the future, right? And I think there's a lot of people who are leaving huge brand name firms, starting their like quote unquote AI enabled law firms, because a lot of these folks are kind of upset. Like, hey, my firm's not they're not seeing the future. They're not on the same page as I am. Like, I think so much is going to change. I think there are going to be winners and losers, right? So on that point, like, I don't disagree with you at all. And I think if you're sitting back and kind of just letting everyone else move first, on that point, like, I agree with you. A lot of attorneys are in trouble.
Each week, I take what I'm hearing in conversations with legal leaders, I analyse the market and track emerging trends in this AI era. In my newsletter called The Future Lawyer Market Intel for the AI Era, I'm focused on what AI is exposing, the opportunities, the blind spots, and the shifts shaping the next 5 years. This is how you see the chessboard before everyone else does. What do you suggest people do then?
I think so here's the biggest problem. Like, my wife is an attorney and she's great. She's lovely. But instead of her spending 30, 40 minutes learning how to use a tool, right? Let's say drafting something will take 20 minutes. She would 10 out of 10 times just draft that 20-minute thing 10 times versus spend one of those times learning how to use the tool. That would reduce the 20 minutes to 2 minutes, right? I think lawyers are very risk averse. They don't like failure. They don't like trying new things. We're not explorers by trade, right? And so it is uncomfortable. You have to try something new. And you've spent 6, 7, 8, however many years getting really, really good at what you're doing. And so it's kind of annoying to be like, now I'm super good at this, but now I have to go try a different way of doing it, even though I've perfected it, right? And so I think, push yourself, learn a little more. If it takes 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 tries, and candidly, if something that would have taken you 20 minutes takes you 40 minutes, that's okay, right? That's okay. I promise you, the tools are good enough that the next time, once you crack that code, it's going to take 2 minutes, right?
That is such a great example. I used to be like your wife, and I still am. Literally, this is the reason why it's making me laugh was because I did a similar thing just yesterday. I had to give myself a pep talk for about 20 minutes. I had to go for a walk for 20 minutes and say to myself, look, I know you've done things this way, but this is going to help. Like, learning how to use a tool to make it quicker is going to help you in the long run. So let's just try it. And I was literally talking to myself like this. And this was on such a simple task that I just did. Like, I knew AI could help me, but I didn't know exactly. And I was trying to learn it and just kind of experiment a little bit. So I know exactly how she feels. And I think probably most lawyers think like this. I still think like this.
And look, I'm guilty of this too, right? To a certain degree. And I think everybody is, because if you already know how to do something, why waste time? But there is a reason why. There's an answer to why. And it's just like, if you don't do it, you're going to fall behind. And like, we don't go use encyclopedias, but you had to learn how to use Google, right? And there was like an effort to that. There was a way to learn how to use it. And so, spend the time. It's an investment. You invested in your legal career. Like, you need to invest in this too. So.
Absolutely. I think this kind of quote comes to mind, which is like, when the fear of, I'm going to adapt it slightly to this situation, but it's a different quote, but I'm kind of like paraphrasing and adapting. But when the fear of falling behind or losing something is greater than the fear of change, then that's the moment in which people start to actually make that shift. And I think, let's say 1 year ago, even, that fear of being behind wasn't as big as it is today. And it will continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger as things adapt a lot more, and people talk about what they're doing in terms of experimenting with AI a lot more. I know I feel pressure when I go onto LinkedIn and I see people are vibe coding at the weekend, and I'm like, I don't even know what that is. But I feel pressure because they're doing something that sounds very, very techy, and it's lawyers doing it, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So I can see that this sense of pressure is making people want to change,
Yeah, and we host in our office, we'll host sessions, like just lawyers I know, of like how to use Claude Code, right? I'm not talking about like in the app. We'll have them like open up terminal and actually write programs. And it's so funny because initially there wasn't that much interest in that. But the number of people who have like now messaged me, and like our groups are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's great, right? Because sometimes it's not even for legal stuff. Like sometimes you just want software that does something else. Like candidly, a lot of the people who come work at big law firms and can't even use this stuff anyways at work. But if it makes your life a little bit easier, whether it's like coordinating things with your, significant other, like going to dinner, like you have something that picks it, or like scheduling. We had somebody come and create a program around like they have a group of people who drop off kids, and so like they were scheduling when who's picking up what based on their schedules, and it's just life can be a lot easier.
What about then, what's your thoughts on people creating these AI native law firms? I'm seeing more and more people creating them, and I think it's really cool. But at the same time, I think, how do you check all that work? How do you check all the stuff that AI is doing? Is it recipe for disaster?
We sell to traditional law firms. We also sell to like AI native law firms, which has been very interesting because the number of people who have been like, hey, I want to leave my firm, they're just not adopting as quickly as I thought. And I'm going to go start my own AI enabled M&A firm. And I think that is one type of AI enabled law firm. And I think the other type is kind of like the Crosbys of the world, where it's kind of just you're running through kind of more basic contracts. Was the question, who do I think will win? Or like just what I think about it generally?
No, just like what do you think? Well, I guess I said, is it recipe for disaster in terms of, is it something that now is very cool, very trendy, and then in the future, will it be something that kind of takes over in terms of how do you double check that the AI is doing things correctly? Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
So is it a recipe for disaster now? The answer is yes. And like we're already seeing this, right? The lazy attorney. There are like do you create your own law firm because you're like you kind of don't want to work anymore? You have you have a book of clients, you just kind of want to crunch through. Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. We're already seeing that. Like how many every couple days there's a new sanction out. There's some news out about some attorney who like cited a bunch of fake cases, right? And they get sanctioned by the court, and some of them are like government positions, and they end up stepping down. So like, yes, I think if you're being lazy, yeah, it's a recipe for disaster. Now, in the future, do I think the models will ultimately be good enough that won't really be the case? Yes. And I think it also depends on people having a deep understanding of what causes hallucination and its lack of context, right? And so building products where it doesn't guess, right? If every single thing has to be drawn to a citation, the citation has to be from a credible source, and it can't be like case law, right? Because the models aren't trained on case law. I think in the future, like, no, I don't think it's catastrophic. I think candidly, every law firm will eventually be an AI enabled law firm. And so it's almost a necessity. And I don't think this is like an issue with the AI. I think it's a matter for the attorney. Like you still have to review the work. This is why lawyers find one.
Interesting. So you think having an AI native type law firm will be a necessity?
Yeah, I think if you're a law firm that's not like using AI to a material degree, I think you're going to grossly fall behind. We're already kind of seeing this, right? So there's a law firm called Cleary Gottlieb. They acquired a tech company. They have an arm called Cleary X. Rumored that their M&A deals take half as much time, and they get 30% on the cost basis. And so like I don't know if that's announced yet or how they're doing it, but I know a lot of folks who I went to school with who are now like private equity funds who are like, we've switched and we're using them, right? And so ultimately, you can't kind of compete with that on a human basis. You can't meet those numbers. Humans can't work that fast. I'm sure you can, but it becomes exceptionally difficult. And frankly, like I don't think it becomes profitable. And so I think unless you adopt these AI tools to a material degree, like you're just going to be left behind. And then the winners of today are not the winners of tomorrow.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I spoke to a guy, I interviewed a guy who has a Claude native law firm, and he mentioned that when he kind of works with other law firms on cases, I guess, like maybe the opposing side, or I don't know in what exact contexts, but he says his firm is literally like his competitive advantage is that he can work so much quicker, so much more efficiently. The AI is, working 24/7, which I'm like, wow, that sounds amazing. But also it confuses me because I'm like, how do you make sure it's doing things properly? But that's another matter. But what he said to me, and I'd love to kind of put this to you to see what you think. But he said that obviously he runs he uses Claude a lot, and he doesn't use any legal tech whatsoever, just Claude, I think. And he said to me that legal tech companies are kind of so the lawyers that are using the legal tech now are training the legal tech to replace them. And it's kind of a controversial view. And I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds really, really dramatic, but it's an interesting angle. And I would love to get your view on what you think about lawyers using legal tech. Obviously, you're slightly biased, but you also have good kind of perspectives in terms of you can be objective at the same time. What do you think about that in terms of lawyers using legal tech and it kind of being a detriment to them in the long term, as in they're training it to replace them by training it how they think, and then eventually it's just another recipe for disaster? That's what he's saying.
I think it's silly. And why do I think it's silly? Obviously, I think it's silly. I think the AI is getting good enough in it, like on its own. It doesn't need you, right? Respectfully to whoever this person is, right? Like if they decide not to use these legal tech tools, and also like if that's the case, you're still using Claude. So like it doesn't matter if it's a legal tech, you're still going through these huge models. And so like I'm hesitant, and I don't think it's necessarily good advice to break your contracts with the biggest and best law firms in the world who have the best litigation teams, right? This is generally not advised. And so like I think if you're going to be doing that, like not good practice. But I also think it's silly. I think to think that, somebody not using a tool or Claude or even like OpenAI is silly. Like candidly, this person's moat is candidly their marketing, right? It's not necessarily the fact that it's even their AI tools. I don't think like Claude is great for some things. It's not very great for other things. But if the question is simply like, do I think using legal AI tools is a bad idea? The answer is no. And if I think it's like, are we training these tools to replace us? No. And respectfully, like these tools already know, just the model out of the gate, know a lot more than you would think. I challenge anybody who watches your podcast to like go and have a conversation, interview the AI on what you do specifically. And I think you'll be blown away at how much it actually knows. And ask specific questions, right? What is my workflow when I do XYZ? Not like, tell me about M&A, right? And I think we find internally that it almost blows us away. We are building a tool to do X, Y, and Z. What else should we be thinking about? And we're like, and it'll come out and we're like, wow, actually, what a wonderful idea. And so the question was like, who's training who here, right? And candidly, as the models get better and there's new and smarter models coming out all the time, it turns out being that like you're not the one with mass intelligence here sometimes. So like it depends.
I guess that's the reason why Copilot is called Copilot and not like Autopilot, because it's like you help each other out,
Right.
The AI helps you help the AI, and it's a partnership,
And I think this goes to like good AI usage starts with a conversation with the AI and be like, what do you already know? It's like we spend a lot of time working on our prompts. And I think the issue is like sometimes people will start their prompts like, you are an XYZ, here's what you know, here's what you don't know. A big issue with like your prompt needs to be very tailored. And like you shouldn't be wasting any tokens. If it already knows it, it shouldn't be in your prompt, right? And so like if you're explaining to it what an M&A attorney does, it already knows. Like, why are you wasting that attention of the AI? Like, just like human beings, AI has an attention span. It's a consideration. So,
okay, that's an interesting idea. I didn't realize that. So, before you do anything, ask it, what do you know? So then you can then use that to design a prompt that's more relevant for your task.
Exactly, because context is a problem. And again, it's the same with human being, right? Treat it as a smart associate. You just hired a smart associate. You're not going to sit there and tell them, hey, this is what a lawyer does. Like they should already know that, and they do already know that. And so like, why are you wasting everyone's time? Same applies for AI, right? It's no different.
That's such a funny point. I've never heard anyone say it like that, but it makes perfect sense. Could you imagine if somebody new started at your law firm, and you start telling them about how to be a lawyer and what that area of law is, and they're like looking at you like, are you joking? I literally went through law school.
And I'm a 6th year associate, and I've been doing this for X amount of years. And so, yeah, I agree.
What do you think about the skills that lawyers will need in the next, let's say, I'm going to say 2 to 5 years, because things are changing that rapidly, apart from the obvious? And I'm not talking about human skills here, like forget judgment and critical thinking and all these things that we know we need to be really good at for the future and now and literally forever. But the different skills that we didn't necessarily need before, like, for example, prompting.
I think prompting is certainly one of them. And here's kind of the analogy. I think with every new wave of technology, we and I alluded to this before, when like encyclopedias came out, we had to learn how to use encyclopedias, right? There was like little tabs, and you would find the letter and you would go through them. And then Google came out, and then we had to learn how to Google, right? And now AI is there, and so it's a different way of doing it. We as people learned how to Google, like we learned how to ask Google certain questions. We need to do that. Now, here's kind of where I think I disagree with a lot of tech vendors is I don't actually think lawyers should be spending time writing prompts. I don't think attorneys should be developing workflows. And here's why, right? Like every single time a new model comes out, we spend a ton of time writing evals, updating all of our prompts, right? Redoing our entire infrastructure if it's required, right? And every like Meta just came out with a new model recently, and it's not public yet, but they acquired a company called Scale, blah blah blah. It's like blowing some of the other models out of the water. I guarantee you, when that comes out, we're going to have to redo a ton of our prompts, right, and our infrastructure. And so if the question becomes like, hey, an associate who's billing $1,500 or pounds, right, wherever you are, an hour, should they be sitting there running evals? And the answer is like, no, right? And I think that's kind of lazy on the side of the tech vendors. Like as an attorney, like I wouldn't go do the legal research and then give it to my client and be like, hey, go make something out of this, right? And now as a tech vendor, I'm certainly not sitting there being like, hey, here is an API, write your own prompt, figure out how to make the best use of this. And so do I think people need to learn how to prompt? Yes. Do I think people need to be a little more fluid than they were before to test new things? The answer is yes. That's kind of the big ones. I don't think too much else has to change really. Just being a little more open.
And I think potentially being able to assess technology, like especially legal technology, better as well, to make sure it's the best tool for them, I think is probably a good one potentially. But I just want to go back to what you said about lawyers not needing necessarily to know a great deal about kind of prompting and stuff, because that's the role of the legal tech kind of company. Don't you think then that puts too much reliance and kind of shifts the balance of power into the legal tech company, and then it leaves the lawyers kind of slightly vulnerable, in the sense that if the lawyers don't fully understand how the legal tech works, because they don't have the technical skills themselves, i.e. mainly prompting, or how to actually use the AI or communicate with it to an effective degree, don't you think that kind of leaves them in a bit of a situation where they're having to rely on that technology a bit too much?
Holly, I'll tell you what, I get in my car and I drive to work, but I'll tell you what, I don't know how to build a car. And so I think the analogy here is like similar, right? It's not identical, but it is kind of the truth, right? Like how many people know how a computer works? How many people know what's inside of a processor, right? I I use Excel, like I don't know how Excel works. And so like sometimes you don't need to know how the sausage is made. You just need to be a good chef or whatever it is to be able to like plate it and put it in front of your customers. And I think that's kind of what ends up being the truth. I think like you have to know enough to a certain degree to know when it's bad, right? But do I think people should be spending 50 hours running evals every time a new model comes out? Like I don't actually think that's a good use of an attorney's time. Like attorneys are good at practicing law, not making tech. And so like I don't know. That's my stance on it.
It is a very good point, about relying on kind of technology more generally. But yeah, I guess the only reason why I think about it for lawyers is the fact that yes, we've had to rely on technology in terms of like case management systems and these things, but legal tech, I mean, I never used legal tech when I did law. No legal tech kind of software apart from case management systems, which is like no big deal. So I don't know. This is why I think like is too much reliance going into the legal tech systems. But when you say it like that, it does make sense. But then when a lawyer's like, oh, I can't do my job properly unless I have this technology, is a little bit, I don't know. Is it worrying?
I think there's so many vendors that do for every Harvey there's a Lagora. For every Lagora there's a Harvey. And so like if all of a sudden one vendor is not working or one or whatever else, like the crazy part is, and this is why I also think there's just going to be more lawyers in the long run. It's never been easier to start a company. And so if you're not performing for your clientele, there's somebody out there who can whip something up relatively quickly and like meet a certain standard that would normally take a year, 2 years, whatever it is, maybe now in like 6 months, 7 months. And so if you have a vendor who's kind of hiding things or not working or like not really serving you well, like this is just basic customer service, you'll go find somebody else and somebody else will come up and be willing to give you what you need. And so I'm not necessarily worried. It's not like there's a monopoly where you're like worried about giving one vendor too much power. Candidly, everybody I talk to is like, we sign 1-year agreements with all these tech vendors at Mac at most, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen next year, which also gives these firms a lot of leverage to like find the next product next year. And candidly speaking, like sometimes before the year is up, but we had clients who were using a certain tool and then they'll be like, hey, we just kind of signed this, but like yours is actually better. It does what we want more. Let us go see what we can do with this other contract. And so like sometimes people aren't even waiting for the whole year because a year nowadays is a lifetime. So I don't think that's as much of a concern. I think ultimately it's a competitive space on the vendor side. And if you're not performing, you're going to get replaced. Somebody else will come.
Absolutely. I've spoken to legal teams who are in charge of, and legal ops who are in charge of kind of bringing on new vendors and these things. And all of them tell me, we're not loyal to a certain vendor. We are just wanting to use the best one for us. And actually, we will try out a few and actually trial them before they go through the governance process or the compliance process because they don't want to, I don't know, onboard one and go through the governance and everything and then realize actually this is not really working for us. So they test out a few and experiment a little bit. So it's very interesting and it is very competitive for legal tech companies for sure. How do they stay ahead? How do the legal tech companies survive in this era?
I think you have to have very deep technical expertise and very deep industry expertise, which is very hard to do, right? The problem with engineers, like you find a company founded, pushed, or whatever by engineers, unless you have like an attorney really playing a big role in how the product is designed, engineers have a different way of thinking, right? Lawyers have a different way of thinking. And so like when you approach a product that's not lawyer brain run, you get a lot of issues. And so we found like I think the best success generally is meet kind of the lawyers where they are, make sure a lawyer brings in their perspective or is designing the product. Like I spend half my day doing product development. And largely it's me building tools that I really wanted, right? Like when I was managing certain senior associates, like when I was a senior associate managing junior associates, like this is kind of what I wanted. When I was a junior associate, this is kind of what I wanted. And so I think like how do you go ahead is just the same as any other thing, is just keep delivering value and know your audience, know what they want. And that's kind of where everything stems from.
And I think in this situation, well, with this argument, it kind of confuses me when a non-legal person creates a legal tech software. I think there was one that somebody, I can't fully remember what it was, but it was like a property law conveyancing tech, and it was founded by people who didn't have any technical legal background. And I was like, how do you do that? How do you stay competitive? Because surely you can know surface level how it is to be a lawyer and what they need to do day to day, but you don't know it fully unless you've actually been in that situation. Because then, as you say, you can take yourself back and think, when I was an associate, what did I want? What did I need? Whereas they can't really do that. Yeah, they can speak to people and things, but it's different when it comes from you.
Yeah. And it's also like different mentalities. Engineers are just move fast, break things. This is not a lawyer's perspective, right? You can't break things. You can't have sensitive client data get leaked because you moved fast, right? And you can't like You can't change the workflow. Candidly, like lawyers are very methodical. There's reasons why they do certain things, even though it's not necessarily optimized as far as time goes, right? But there's precedent. And so I think you're right. And I think, and this is not my thing, this is A16Z has a podcast that we're talking about. Again, this is the first time in history where you really, really need somebody to pair like somebody who has deep, deep technical expertise with somebody who has like deep industry expertise. And the winners of the future are the people who can pair those two things the best. If you're highly technical, but you don't have the industry expertise, or if you have the industry expertise and you're not technical, you don't become the winner of the future, right? You're not the winner in the next round of whatever comes after this AI wave. So agreed.
I do agree with you there. I think it's such an interesting time because it's so competitive on both sides. You know, you've got the lawyers who are worried about falling behind and implementing that technology. Then you've got the legal tech companies who are kind of competing for those law firms and lawyers. Honestly, it's crazy. I was speaking to a legal headhunter who has been working in the industry for like, you know, more than 20 years or something, and she was saying this is literally the change I've been looking for, the disruption I've been looking for 20 years, and it's finally happening. It's just so interesting. And I do agree, actually. I think it's interesting. It's only interesting for me because I'm kind of on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
I'm not involved.
I think it creates a phenomenal opportunity for some firms to really win in the future. Like I don't think any firm now has a locked in, like just because you're number one now, I don't think that means you're number one in 3-4 years. I think we're going to see a large amount of disruption. And candidly, I just don't think enough firms have a good explanation to like how are you using AI to make, you might, more efficient or to deliver more product. Or I mean, everyone just buys Harvey or Lagora and they check the box. And so I think we talked about this earlier of like, well, what do lawyers need to do? Like they need to be more innovative. Like you need more than that. And so like candidly speaking, like, and this is also partially why I think lawyers will still be like everybody wants kind of a bit of an unfair advantage. If you think about it, contract dispute, right? If everybody's using the same model and there's no lawyers involved, you're just going to get to that same point. There's no like advantage over the other person. I think the other reason why lawyers aren't going anywhere is because they're still insurance, right? You still want somebody to point a finger at. Ultimately, you want somebody to explain things to you as well. If I go to the doctor and it prints out a sheet of paper and it says you have X disease, the first thing I'm going to say is like, go get me a doctor. Like, I don't want to talk to this machine. And so I think like these things are very personal. Same divorce, right? Imagine an AI divorce attorney who goes and splits everything down the middle. Like there's just such an emotional process to that. Like, who gets the dog? You can't split the dog in half, right? But if you get the dog, that's worth X amount. And so like, I don't think there's a lot more to law than just like, can you extract information out of a contract and put it into something else? And it's the same with other aspects of humans' life. We're all just still human beings. So.
I definitely agree. There's definitely some emotional aspects of law that cannot be replaced by AI. Like you say, family, immigration, where it's really important to be human and deal with other humans. Yes, you can automate processes, document review and different things like that. But I think if I was becoming a lawyer now, I would probably go down the family route and probably become like a high net worth divorce lawyer, because I know that they want high net worth people tend to, I might be completely generalizing and be completely wrong here, but they kind of tend to want that more hand holding, more attention, that quality treatment. And that's where the human comes in. So I think that's probably where I would go. Just on a random side note.
If I was an attorney or if I was like going through law school now, I would probably quit and just go into plumbing or something else, candidly speaking. I think it's a very scary place to be. I don't disagree with you that like if you focus on areas where there's still that emotional connection, I think that's going to be way better than something that's just commoditized, because I think those are going to go first.
If you were creating a law firm right now, what would you be doing in terms of what like AI would you be putting in place, and how would you be, I guess, what would be your priority in terms of how you would train your staff members or your lawyers?
I would not change how I train my lawyers. I think if I were building an AI-enabled law firm, a law firm of the future, I would go find the absolute best attorneys and I would have them continue to do what they were always doing. I don't think you change the role of the attorney. I do think, though, that you couple these very smart, hardworking attorneys with people who are phenomenal developers. This is where I don't think law firms do a good job. And it's partially a problem of how do you find a Japanese interpreter when you don't speak Japanese? And so I think people run into this problem. And the crazy part was like, this is a little story about me, but like I left, I was at great firms, law firms, like international firms. I left and like they have great names. And then I got into this program called Y Combinator. And so I got in and I was like, hey, I'm this person. I worked at these firms and everyone's like, yeah, nobody cares. Which tech company did you work at? Were you at Google or Tesla or something? And I was like the firms I work for represented these people and they're just like, no, we don't care. And then I went from being with people who have like button up shirts to people who wear hoodies and, shower some days. It was a very different crowd. And so I think the problem with law firms and attorneys is unfortunately some of these people who you would never see walking around at a law firm are candidly absolutely phenomenal programmers. You might see people with a wonderful resume that you think is a wonderful resume. And like I've hired some of those people. And unfortunately, like I've had to let some of them go. Candidly, almost all of them go. And then you find somebody who's like, they develop video games, and they wear hoodies and, they don't speak like you would typically see people at a law firm speaking. And they have been able to build these phenomenal tools that would have taken other folks months. And so like you asked the question of what would I do if I was building an AI, like a law firm of the future? I would just go find the best attorneys, make sure I have the clients, and then go find somebody who can build great tech and partner them, right? So you really need a bridge of these two worlds.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's the first time where we see this need, this necessity to bring these two types of people together. Whereas, in the past, IT and the law department were always completely separate, and you would only go to them. Well, I would only go to them if I needed to literally like print out something. It's like, I don't know how to use the printer. Can you do it? Or like, can you fix my computer? Like, that's it. But now it's like they need to be in partnership.
It's not support staff anymore. They're an integral part, right? And I'm going to be on a panel here in about a week, and like we just had our meeting, and they were in the innovation team. And typically, even innovation teams are not kind of considered to be on the same level as like the attorneys, like the practicing attorneys. But I think that needs to change. But it's kind of hard to do, right? Because then there's a power dynamic, and then there's you have to kind of be a little more flexible. And I think a lot of these larger, more institutionalized law firms are going to have a harder time giving more control away from some of these attorneys. But unfortunately, attorneys aren't necessarily phenomenal business people. They are just really, really good attorneys. And so I think there's a bit of a conflict there that I think people who figure that out really, really win. You run a law firm, you don't run a tech company, but I think if you want to be the law firm of the future, you have to be able to do both.
Law firms are becoming tech companies, basically. It's just crazy, the shift that we're seeing, but it's also kind of exciting because it in a way it democratizes a lot of law. It was always a kind of a hierarchical setup, and it would be the partners would traditionally go out and get the work, and the associates would be doing or the juniors would be doing the admin stuff, the setup. And now it kind of, everything's just been mixed up. Everything's kind of just been disrupted completely because, the junior could be a massive AI expert, and then they might be needed with the partners. And do you know what I mean? It just completely changes everything.
Yeah, and I don't suspect big partners, the big law firms are going to be okay deferring to associates on big decisions, right? But that's also why I repeated this, I said this earlier, where I don't think the winners of today are necessarily the winners of tomorrow.